Quick revision of polity. Who was the permanent president of the Constitution Assembly formed in 1946? Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Which specific body was responsible for the making of the Indian Constitution, the Constituent Assembly? Dr. B.R. Ambedkar served as the chairman of which critical committee during the drafting of the Constitution? The drafting committee. The preamble of the Indian Constitution is based on dash resolution moved by Jawaharlal Nehru, objective resolution. Which three terms were added to the preamble by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976? That is socialist, secular and integrity. Concept preamble. An introductory statement that set out the guiding purpose, principle and the philosophy of the Constitution. Which article of the Constitution describe India as a union of states rather than a federation of states? That is Article 1. The power to admit new states into the union or establish new state is vested in the Parliament. Article 5 to 11 of the Indian Constitution deal with which subject matter? Citizenship. Under the Indian Constitution, citizenship is governed by which part? Part 2. Article 5 to 11. Citizenship. Fundamental rights are enshrined in which part of the Constitution? Part 3. Which article is referred to as the heart and soul of the Constitution by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar? Article 32. Right to constitutional remedies. The state is prohibited from discriminating against any citizen on grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex or place of birth under Article 15. Which fundamental right was abolished as a fundamental right and made a legal right by the 44th Amendment? Right to property. The directive principle of state policy are contained in which part of the Constitution? Part 4. Are the directive principle of state policy enforceable by the courts? No. Fundamental duties were incorporated into the Constitution based on the recommendation of the Swaran Singh Committee. Which article defines the fundamental duties of Indian citizens? Article 51A. Parliament's power to amend the Constitution and its procedure is laid down in Article 368. Can the basic structure of the Constitution be amended by Parliament under Article 368? No, according to the केशवानंद भारती केस रूलिंग. और इसी केस के अकॉर्डिंग प्रियम्बल को कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का पार्ट माना गया था. In a parliamentary system, the executive is responsible to the dash for its policies and acts. Legislature. The Indian Constitution establishes a dash system of government which contain both federal and unitary feature. Quasi-federal. Name one unitary feature of the Indian Constitution, that is single citizenship or a strong center or single constitution. National emergency is declared under which article of the Indian Constitution? Article 352. Article 352. National emergency. Failure of constitutional machinery in a state, President's rule is dealt with under Article 356. Financial emergency can be proclaimed under the provision of Article 360. Who is the formal executive head of the Indian Union? The President of India. Who administers the oath of office to the President of India? The Chief Justice of India. The Vice President of India acts as the ex officio chairman of the Rajya Sabha. Who is the real executive authority and the head of the government in India? The Prime Minister. The Parliament of the India consists of the President, the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Which house of the Parliament is known as House of the People? Lok Sabha. The maximum gap between two sessions of Parliament cannot exist 6 months. Who appoints the judges of the Supreme Court of India? The President. Concept judicial review. The power of the judiciary to examine the constitutionality of legislative enactments and executive orders. Who is the executive head of a state in India? The governor. The state legislature consists of the governor and in some states two houses, the legislative assembly and the legislative council. Article 214 states that there shall be a high court for each state. The Election Commission of India is established under which article? Article 324. Which constitutional body is responsible for conducting election to the Parliament and state legislatures? The Election Commission of India. Which body is responsible for recruiting candidates for the All India Services and Central Services? Union Public Service Commission. The Finance Commission is constituted by the President every 5 years. Which article mandates the setting up of the Finance Commission? Article 280. The GST counselling is a joint form of the Centre and the states. Which article provide for the National Commission for Scheduled Caste? Article 338. The Comptroller and Auditor General (CAG) is appointed by the President, who is the Chief Legal Advisor to the Government of India. The Attorney General of India. Niti Aayog replaced which previous body in 2015? The Planning Commission. Is the National Human Rights Commission a constitutional body or statutory body? It is a statutory body. Which body is the apex vigilance institution free of control from executive authority monitoring or vigilance activity under the central government? Central Vigilance Commission. The Commission of India is tasked with redrawing the boundaries of various Assembly and Lok Sabha constituencies based on the recent census delimitation. How many schedules are currently in the Indian Constitution? 12. The 10th schedule of Constitution contains provision regarding anti-defection. Which schedule lists the allocation of seats in the Rajya Sabha to the states and union territories? The 4th schedule. The 8th schedule of the Indian Constitution deals with official languages. There are 22 official languages. Under the MPLAD scheme, the funds are released in the form of grants in aid. Who has the power to summon the Houses of Parliament? The President. What is the minimum age required to become the President of India? 35 years. A money bill can be introduced only in which house of the Parliament? Lok Sabha. The governor of a state holds office during the pleasure of the President. Which article provides the High Court with the power to issue writs? Article 226. The joint sitting of both houses of Parliament is presided over by the Speaker of the Lok Sabha. The concept of concurrent list in India Constitution was borrowed from the Constitution of which country? Australia. Under which article can the Parliament create a new All India Service? Article 312. Who acts as the channel of communication between the President and the Council of Ministers? The Prime Minister. The Attorney General of India has the right of audience in all courts of India. Which commission was established to protect the interest of socially and educationally backward classes? National Commission for Backward Classes. What is the maximum strength of the Lok Sabha as per the Constitution? 552. The 11th schedule of the Constitution lists the power and functions of Panchayat. The 12th schedule of the Constitution deals with the powers and responsibility of municipalities. Who appoints the chairman and members of the State Public Service Commission? The Governor. Although the Governor appoints members of the SPSC, they can only be removed by the President. Which article provides for the appointment of the CAG? Article 148. The Central Information Commission was established under the provision of which Act? Right to Information 2005. In the absence of both the President and the Vice President, who discharge the function of the President? The Chief Justice of India. Which part of the Constitution deals with the official language of Union? Part 17. The Panchayati Raj system was constitutionalized by which Amendment Act? The 73rd Amendment Act. Which fundamental right cannot be suspended even during a national emergency? Rights under Article 20 and 21. The Rajya Sabha is a permanent body and is not subject to dissolution. What fraction of the Rajya Sabha member retire every second year? 1/3. The Council of Ministers is collectively responsible to Lok Sabha. Who is the chairman of the Niti Aayog? The Prime Minister. The voting age was reduced from 21 to 18 years by which Amendment Act? By 61st Amendment Act. Which schedule of the Constitution contain the forms of oaths or affirmations? The third schedule. The salary and allowance of the President and other high officials are listed in the second schedule. Which house of the state legislature is known as the elder house or upper house, that is legislative council or Vidhan Parishad? The Regulating Act of 1773 designated the Governor of Bengal as the Governor General of Bengal. Which historical act introduced a system of double government through the Board of Control and Court of Directors? Pitt Act of 1784. It act introduced a double government through the Board of Control and Court of Director. Pitt's India Act of 1784. Pitt's India Act of 1784. The Charter Act of 1833 made the Governor General of Bengal the Governor General of India. Under which act was the dual system of government introduced in the provinces? Government of India Act of 1919. Which historical document served as the blueprint for the current Indian Constitution, providing about 75% of its detail? Government of India Act 1935. The Constituent Assembly of India was formed in 1946 based on the recommendation of the Cabinet Mission Plan. Who moved the objective resolution in the Constituent Assembly on December 13, 1946? Jawaharlal Nehru. Which body served as both the Provisional Parliament and the Constitution making body of independent India? The Constituent Assembly. The preamble is based on the dash drafted and moved by Pandit Nehru objective resolution. Which three words were added to the preamble by 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976? Socialist, secular and integrity. The preamble declares India to be a sovereign, socialist, democratic republic and secular. In which landmark case did the Supreme Court rule that the preamble is a part of the Constitution? केशवानंदा भारती केस 1973. और इसके बेसिक स्ट्रक्चर में कोई भी चेंज नहीं किया जाएगा, ये भी इसी केस से डिसाइड हुआ था. Which article of the Indian Constitution deal with the Union and its territory? Article 1 to 4. Under Article 3, who has the power to form new states or alter the boundaries of existing states? The Parliament. Which part of the Indian Constitution deals with the provision of citizenship? Part 2. In India, the power to enact laws regarding citizenship is vested exclusively in the Parliament. Fundamental rights are enshrined in which part of the Indian Constitution? Part 3. Which article of the Indian Constitution defines the state for the purpose of fundamental right? Article 12. The right to equality is covered under which range of article? Article 14 to 18. Which article of the Indian Constitution abolishes untouchability? Article 17. The right to constitutional remedies is granted under which article? Article 32. The directive principle of state policy are contained in which part of the Constitution? Part 4. Are directive principle of state policy are enforceable by any court? No. Which article directs the state to organize village panchayat? Article 40. Fundamental duties were added to the constitution based on the recommendation of the Swaran Singh Committee. Fundamental duties are listed in which specific article, Article 51A, which article grants Parliament the power to amend the constitution, Article 368, an amendment that affect the federal structure of the constitution requires ratification by at least dash of the state legislature, half of the state legislature. The parliament system in India is based on the principle of cooperation and coordination between the executive organ and legislative. Who is the de jure nominal executive head in the Indian parliamentary system? The President. A federal system typically features a dash of powers between the national and regional governments, division of power. The existence of All India services is considered a dash feature of the Indian Constitution, a unitary feature. Under which article can the President declare a national emergency? Article 352. A financial emergency is declared under which article? Article 360. Who is the Supreme Commander of Defence Force of India? The President. The President of India is elected by an electoral college, consists of dash members of both houses of parliament and state legislative assemblies elected. What is the maximum term of office for the Vice President of India? 5 years. Who acts as the ex officio chairman of the Rajya Sabha? The Vice President. The Prime Minister is the head of the government. Under the Indian Constitution, the counseling minister is collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha. What is the maximum strength of the Lok Sabha as per the Constitution? 552 members. The questionnaire is a parliamentary device used to hold the executive accountability. Which court in India is considered the grantor of fundamental rights? The Supreme Court. The collegium system is a method used for the appointment and transfer of judges. Concept judicial review. The power of the judiciary to examine the constitutionality of legislative enactment and executive orders. The governor of a state is appointed by the president. In a state legislature, which house is known as the permanent house? The legislative counseling, that is Vidhan Sabha. Which article provide for the establishment of a high court for a state? Article 214. The Election Commission of India is responsible for conducting election to Parliament, state legislature and the offices of President and Vice President. Under which article is the UPSC established? Article 315. The primary duty of the Finance Commission is to recommend the distribution of dash between the union and the state net proceeds of tax. Who acts as the chairperson of GST counseling? The Union Finance Minister. Which article provide for the National Commission for Scheduled Caste? Article 338. The CAG of India is appointed by the President. Who is the highest law officer in the country? The Attorney General of India. Niti Aayog was established as a successor to which body? The Planning Commission. The National Human Rights Commission is a dash body established in 1993. It is a statutory body established in 1993. Which body is the main agency for preventing corruption in the central government? Central Vigilance Commission. The Central Information Commission was established under provision of the Right to Information Act 2005. What is the primary function of Delimitation Commission of India? Redrawing the boundaries of various Assembly and Lok Sabha constituencies based on a recent census. Which schedule of the Indian Constitution contains the list of state and union territories? First schedule. The anti-defection law is contained in Schedule 10. Which schedule deal with the distribution of power between the union and state and concurrent list? 7th schedule. How many languages are currently recognized in 8th schedule? 22. The MPLAD scheme allows members of parliament to recommend developmental work in their constituencies up to an annual amount of 5 crore rupees. What does the acronym FCRA stand for in the context of Foreign Funding Regulation, Foreign Contribution Regulation Act? Which ministry is responsible for implementing the FCRA in India? The Ministry of Home Affairs. The basic structure doctrine was propounded by the Supreme Court in the Keshwananda Bharati case. Which constitutional body is responsible for auditing the accounts of both the union and state government? The CAG. The president rule in a state is imposed under which article? Article 356. Which body serves as the apex court of India? The Supreme Court. The power of habeas corpus is an example of writ. Which article describes India as a union of states? Article 1. Is the right to property currently a fundamental right in India? No, it is a legal constitutional right under Article 300A. The joint sitting of both houses of parliament is presided over by the Speaker of the Lok Sabha. Which part of the constitution is often described as the Magna Carta of India? Part 3. Fundamental Rights. The State Public Commission SPSC members are appointed by the governor. Which commission is responsible for investigating matters relating to the safeguard provided for backward classes? National Commission for Backward Classes. The concept of single citizenship in India is borrowed from which country's constitution? The United Kingdom. British Constitution. Which article says that the Prime Minister shall be appointed by the President? Article 75. The Public Account Committee of Parliament examines the audit report of CAG. Which schedule was added by the 73rd Amendment Act to the list of powers of Panchayat? 11th schedule. Who has the final power to decide whether a bill is a money bill or not? The Speaker of the Lok Sabha. The 9th schedule was added to the Constitution by the First Amendment Act. Which body is responsible for the delimitation of constituencies after every